So one of the biggest factors to your success is not only expanding and scaling your operation in lieu of recruiting agents and teaching them how to sell and duplicating that process over and over again. It's also making sure that you shore up, mitigate, and as much as possible, prevent chargebacks from happening. You see, in the insurance agency game, you are responsible for every one of your downline agents if they don't pay back their chargebacks. It is critical to develop a system to protect yourself, your business, and your investment from the travails, and they are very big if you let it get out of hand, of chargebacks rolling up to you. And what I'm going to be doing in this masterclass is going over my entire chargeback mitigation and prevention system. I'm going to take you through the process of scaring agents straight so they know not to leave me with debt. I'm going to go through the process of explaining ways to control, mitigate, and potentially reduce completely the risk of chargeback debt from agents who are just lazy and don't want to pay back the lapsed debt that occurs. And also, just as important, the fraudulent debt that has become way more commonplace in the last couple of years of legitimately bad agents writing very bad business and taking you for a ride. So if you're thinking about building an agency, or maybe you already have an agency and you've been hit with chargebacks like I have, and you want to see a way around, a way to avoid it and to get rid of the big intrinsic risks and damage that can be caused by chargeback, this masterclass video is absolutely for you. My name is David Duford. I own Insurance Agency Builders. This is my new channel designed specifically for the agency builder in mind. The purpose of this channel is to give all of my information without any expectation of you to buy anything on what I have learned since 2013 and 2014, building my very successful valuation agency at 8 figures in the final expense and Medicare space, and extending that to you to help you avoid, really, as far as this video is concerned, the mistakes I've made not knowing anything about recruiting and kind of learning on the way, so that you can be more successful, be more profitable, and run a much more happier and less stressful agency. So let's jump right into it. So I'll start with my story here, because I think this helps paint the picture of where we're going to go and why I have taken the route towards agency building and some of these preventative measures into reducing and trying to eliminate fraudulent and roll-ups that come from agents. I have experienced in the last year probably the highest level of chargebacks, not just from agents who write business and it lapses and it doesn't pay back. That's going to happen. That's a part of the process. But more importantly, and where I think the biggest risk to you lies, is with fraudulent, literally people breaking the law, fraudulently writing applications, defrauding not just the agency, but also the client, the carrier, running afoul of DOI state-based law. These have been serious problems that have been happening, especially if you're in the life insurance side of the business, that have really been in an uptick, I think, since the popularity of life insurance, simplified issue sales has gone through the roof, as well as also just fraud in general is up since COVID for whatever reason. Lots of carriers have been under attack through fraud. People's identities have been stolen, and it is important for you as somebody running an agency to have a system in place to avoid this. Last year, between approximately 4 agents that I can think of, that I know without any sort of hesitation, these 4 agents collectively stole from me in the form of fraudulent applications written $125,000 in roll-up debt that I had to pay for. And that's just 4 agents. And the thing is, if you talked to me back in 2015 and 16 as I was growing my agency, if I got hit with that then, it would have been a very mortal wound maybe, and could have taken me out of the business. So I'm really passionate about the subject. You're going to learn how to avoid and identify these type of agents that are out there, and they're looking for unsuspecting people to take advantage of that are otherwise positive forces trying to help agents out. And you need to be aware of what to look for, how to avoid them, because it can end your business. And this business is awesome. And luckily, I'm in a place in my business where I can easily absorb that. While it's frustrating, it has had no major impact, thank God, on my business operations, but they can absolutely have an impact on you. So we're going to go over the system of how to, in the beginning, to deter agents from joining, basically going over how to build a system to mitigate and reduce these fraudulent chargebacks, as well as the chargebacks that just occur from lapses, and making sure that agents take care of it. And then we're going to answer a bunch of questions, as far as a lot of questions I get about chargebacks and how to reduce the roll-up debt. And so this is going to be a very comprehensive type of study. So this is the first thing we've got to do when we look at chargebacks is we have to set the standard up front in the beginning of the contracting process. So what I'm going to do is actually go over to my my computer. I'm going to bring up my web page, my onboarding page, and I'm going to talk you through what I show every single agent that joins DeFord Insurance Group. Again, in my agency, this is what we're doing, and then explain to you on camera what this is, why it's there, and why it's extremely effective in reducing fraudulent and really just like, bad business type of chargeback situation. Since introducing this, a lot of the fraud that was going on the last year this time has completely dropped off the face of the planet, and I credit this system tremendously. So let's go over to my screen. I'm going to walk you through it and give you a really detailed analysis so that you can literally copy and paste what I'm doing and implement it in your own system to prevent you from being ripped off. So come on over. Okay, so this is one of the several different onboarding pages I've constructed to get agents started with DeFord Insurance Group. And what I'm going to do is take you through the beginning parts of it and kind of walk you through the rationale behind what is here and why it's here so that you can better understand the benefits to deterring, mostly in our case, what I would consider to be fraudulent roll-up debt. This is, to me, based off of my experience, the number one issue at hand that agency owners face are agents who are willing to basically risk going to jail. And you have to have what I would call a scared straight mentality in dealing with this up front and center. If you guys are as old as I am, you probably remember the MTV show Scared Straight. This is where adolescents who were screwing around in school were sent to a maximum penitentiary jail, and kids walk around holding some guy's pocket and getting screamed at about, if you end up in here, you're going to be somebody's what. The point is that you have to be upfront about this stuff, because if you're not, then you're a victim, right? And so a strong upfront showing of what will happen and the consequences of screwing you and how you will go after them prevents 99% plus of the potential fraud that's out there. So let's get through this and talk about it. So the first thing that I do is I show every single person in the onboarding process, and I require them to review, watch, and read this memorandum and video on how we prevent financial fraud prevention and how we prosecute against agent fraud, both civilly and criminally. And to give you kind of a shorthand version of this, I walk through what I'm about to show you on camera about the problems with fraud, how prevalent it is now, and how we don't pull punches. If we have an agent who rips us off, we go after them, and we do civilly and criminally, meaning we're going to get our money back plus damages, and then we're going to make sure to get the local authorities to file a case against that agent so that they now have to deal with a criminal allegation, which if they're prosecuted successfully for a criminal allegation, the civil penalty associated with that doesn't get washed away in a bankruptcy. So it's a very powerful statement, and it scares people who have this penchant of theft and stealing from you. So a couple of things that I have used, and if you're interested in this, reach out to me. I'm happy to get this to you, because I think using this material is very helpful in painting the picture. So we have a memorandum that goes through exactly what to expect in the standards that we have when it comes to fraud and agents who don't pay back their debt. So there's no punches pulled. So first of all, one thing that we show in our document here is if you've got a vector, meaning you owe another agency or a carrier money, you ain't working with us. I don't care what your circumstances is. If you can't pay your debts to this person, the time's going to come when you can't pay your debts to me. Again, a zebra doesn't change its stripe, ladies and gentlemen. Don't think that you're an exception to their rule. You will be screwed just as hard, if not harder. So anybody who has a vector, they don't get to join my agency. If they get a notification, if we get a notification that they have a carrier with another agency and they owe them money, they are immediately, and I mean immediately, having their advance commissions removed until that vector has been proven to be completely paid off with some sort of email image verification that they've paid it. Again, we don't play anymore with agents who don't have enough responsibility to take care of their debts, even with their another agency altogether, because again, what we've seen with some of the agents that defrauded us, they run up a bunch of debt with XYZ carrier, but they've had carriers elsewhere with other organizations, and then they run up a bunch of debt with them too. It's kind of this cascading effect where they rewrite or roll a bunch of business. And so when you get a vector notification, some carriers will shut you down automatically on advancing, others will give you the option. For me personally, we shut them down entirely because the risk is just not worth the effort. The upside potential is usually just not worth the downside potential in losing a big chunk of change because the guy was just adamant about ripping off. And then we talk about how we're going to pursue them civilly, meaning we're going to assess damages to get back our money they stole from us, as well as seek criminal prosecution as well. Again, we will pay a lawyer what it takes to go after these agents, and we want them to understand that. We explain what Vector 1 is. We explain how chargebacks works. These are just because some of these agents who are new, they may be like, oh my gosh, this is kind of scary. So we want to make sure that they understand as long as they pay back their advances, there's nothing to worry about. Answer some basic questions. And this is where really the rubber hits the road. We actually show them documentation of circumstances where we have gotten agents fired, or I should say have their license removed, or where we have had agents successfully prosecuted criminally and civilly in conjunction with the carriers that we're a part of. We show them the papers, the documents. And I'll show you guys on screen here. There's one particular agent who in the state of Illinois ripped off this agency for $335,000. His first client that he did this and defrauded was his own grandma. I mean, this guy is just a trip. And he spent 8 years in the federal or state-based penitentiary for this white-collar crime. And, you know, nobody wants to go to jail. It isn't it's not worth the risk going in there. God knows what they're going to do to you in there, right? You're just an insurance agent. So we show this to them, and I circle this. I show them this is what happens. The restitution will be paid. The time will be spent. And it's not worth trying to rip me off because I'm on top of this stuff. I'm going to make sure that justice is served. And the point to you out there is you have to be willing to say that up front in the onboarding process. And rest assured to the ethical agents that they have nothing to worry about. It's the frauds out there, as small of a minority as they are, they exist. And they need to know that you don't play games. And again, we've had other ones right now. One agent, we got their license suspended and completely terminated. We're in the process of pursuing 2 other agents from last year and building a case around affidavits sent to the clients they defrauded. Looking at IP verification on the e-apps they defrauded as well that showed there was no evidence of them actually being in person as they said they were when they completed the app, so that when we do file and have the case set up civilly and criminally, there's a pretty good chance that they're going to jail and they're going to suffer a lot of duress because of their decision to rip me off as well as the carriers. So this scares a lot of people. I am sure in the process of recruiting, I have lost agents who had the penchant to be fraudulent. And I'm sure at the same time, people rest assured that, hey, I'm a good guy, I don't have to worry about that. I have now selectively got the good agents overall, I believe, who aren't going to do this kind of thing, and then let the rest of them go to other guys out there who will take anybody with a pulse, and which you shouldn't do, and then run their scam on them. Now, a couple other things here that I also like to employ. We use a company called Burbix. It's the best option I've seen for identity verification We do what's called a liveness test. So there are circumstances where agents had their identity stolen. They ran fraudulent people ran a bunch of debt up, stole from that agent essentially, and then disappeared. So in case that happens, we do Burbix up front. It's a required liveness test where they take their cell phone, they look into the camera, they submit an ID, and they verify that that's who they say they are on camera with what the ID says. This is another step to prevent fraudulent people who are pretending to be an agent try to come in and do fraudulent things. Again, this is cheap. It's 99 bucks a month. I want to say each liveness test is maybe $1 or something. So it's not a substantially high expense, but it's just that other next layer of protection against the bad guys. The other thing that we talk about in this video is, and this is huge, guys, I learned this from a car guy who joined my agency, and he gave me this piece of advice after going through this mess with the fraud. You've got to audit your book of business, okay? So what he taught me was when he ran his car dealership up in Canada, he would call up approximately a quarter of his new car sales and just do a friendly conversation. Hey, how's it going? How has it been? Do you like your new car? Any questions you got? And the reason he did that is because there were people who would steal credit card and banking information to come in and put a down payment, set up a loan on a car to buy it, and then disappear. And the person who bought it had their identity stolen. And so what this process does, it is allows them up front to test out if fraud has actually been committed very early on, and to jump in front of it, ahead of it as quickly as possible before, say, the person disappears or something like this. So how does this relate to the insurance business? Well, on the insurance side, what we do is we have a person whose responsibility is to call 25% of new agents' business, a friendly courtesy call, just to say, hey, it's so-and-so from said agent's office, just want to thank you for the business, make sure that, see if you have any questions for us. Something that's very non-confrontational, that's not going to get the agent upset, but just to kind of confirm that A, the person in question actually did take out the application, and B, the number is legit. So for example, what a lot of these agents will do is they'll steal, the ones that are frauds, they'll steal client information, social security numbers, etc. Maybe they stole that information when they're at another company, and then they'll go into some of these carriers' applications, which is incredible in our space and final expense, where they don't require a verification via voice to approve the plan, and just run a bunch of applications through them. And if you call behind those apps and you see that the phone number doesn't work, or you see that the person who picks up the phone has no clue what you're talking about, you can get in front of these chargeback issues and maybe only have a couple of grand in debt versus 10, 20, 30, 50 plus $1,000 in debt from just one guy. So this is a must that you should always do, no matter if you're captive, independent, have a lot of carriers or have little carriers. You've got to call behind a percentage of your new agents' calls, and as they prove themselves as being legit, writing good business, then reduce those number of calls over time and focus on the new guys. Because what I have seen in the fraud side of things is that the biggest fraud comes from the new guys who are brand new that have just started, and in some cases from agents who are kind of sleeper agents who have had contracts, haven't done anything, then all of a sudden they write a bunch of business out of nowhere. So that is how that process works. I think we talked about everything. Oh yeah, the last thing here, I think this is another helpful thing. We'll do a video on expanding on the other reason why we do this, but we take a lead deposit up front from our new agents. And the reason is that if you're a fraudster, you probably don't have money because you got to steal it first to have it. And so somebody who's going to have to pay a $500 plus deposit just to get started with leads, it's another detriment to somebody who's looking for an easy kill. Again, robbers, if you think about this analogy, they're not looking for the house like ours with the German Shepherd behind the door. We've got like 4, 5, 6 guns, right? You know, I know jiu-jitsu. I've got cameras outside. Like, we're well protected. They're not going to go to my house. They're going to go to the neighbor's house, which I don't know if this is the case. Everybody seems to be more protected nowadays than they used to be. But they're going to go to a neighbor's house that doesn't have a dog, where all the lights are off, where there's no evidence of cameras, etc. They're looking for the easy victims. They don't want to go to jail. They want in and out. They want to pick the low-hanging fruit. And the same applies to fraudsters in our space. So don't make it easy to join. Don't just take anybody. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But the lead deposit is one part of that process to slow down fraudsters and make them think twice. In combination with the rest of this, why would I want to go work with David? Because I got to put up with all this crap. I'll just find another agency, because there's a lot of them out there that'll take anybody with the pulse and pull this kind of crap on them. All right, so that was my onboarding process that I use to mitigate and prevent a lot of the fraud that comes in, and then also to warn them of what's going to happen if they think they can somehow get away with it, even though we have all these preventative measures in place with the audit system. I can't stress enough to you guys out there running any kind of agency, even if it's not final expense like mine, no matter what it is, you should be doing this stuff, because this is an insurance policy. That's really how you have to look at it. And while we all would love to have honest people throughout the nation, and that's all we have to deal with, the truth is, if you're working at any sort of scale, you're going to deal with fraudsters, deceptive people, pieces of crap that will try to rob you and don't care about you. And so you have to put up these protective measures. And I'm going to tell you from personal experience, as somebody who is half glass full, who generally trusts people and is a good person, you have to develop this kind of sense of healthy paranoia. You've got to protect your assets. You're extending advanced privileges to people you really don't even know. And so you have to treat it with some level of maturity, and not like me, because it cost me tremendously in a very short time. And I've heard of even worse cases. In fact, a friend of mine in the business had a $250,000 chargeback. It's crazy. And we'll talk about why the carriers let these agents get away with them. And again, this kind of goes on and on about why we do what we do. So we're going to get to a list of questions here, because it's not just having an upfront preventative measure and system. There are some things you can do on the back end and things that you really need to be concerned with. So I got about 12 different points. Again, I want to cover everything about the chargeback situation and the problems with them, so that you don't have to experience the pain that I did. So we're just going to go through these. I'll indicate if one is more important than another, of like in a big picture, like something's like an 80-20 rule, like the stuff you really need to pay attention to that makes the biggest difference. And this is the big one, I think, for me, is that be hands-on. So my mistake early on and really throughout the entirety of my agency until recently is that I insisted on doing things on my own. I'm a solopreneur. I'm kind of a lone wolf. I'm in a INTJ mastermind, kind of, I could sit at home, be quiet, run things systematically on my own. It's just my nature to do that. But the problem is, at some point in your business, you're just going to get overwhelmed, and you can't do everything. Even though I was systematic and I had great systems put into place, there are opportunities to be taken advantage of that, had I had some preventative measures in place, this never would have been a problem. So for example, the best thing you can do, and this is an 80-20 rule, is be hands-on with your new people. Make sure that when you bring them on, that you train them, that you talk to them, that you review their sales calls, that you look at their production. Don't just like ignore their existence, okay? Be hands-on with them. If they're not interactive with you, or if they are doing something that's funny while you're hands-on, you have the opportunity to talk to them, to see what they say about that, to get clarity. And again, the more hands-on you are, especially with your new people, the higher likelihood that you're going to avoid this fraud and chargeback issue that has become so prevalent. Number two, pull advancing on non-performers and non-conformists. So let me make this straight, y'all. You all are running an insurance agency where you grant the privilege, it is a privilege, it ain't a right, to advance commission on written business. That advance is confirmed and has, what's the word, the collateral is your good name. It is the policy, but if the policy collapses, it's you. You're the collateral behind it. So you have every right to control how advances are done. And you have to understand that not everybody deserves an advance. In my opinion, if you're going to recruit and you give an advance out, it better be to people who are actually writing business. It sounds like it makes sense on the surface, but the truth is, some of us just let people have an open credit card to use whenever they want. And as your business scales and becomes more complicated, having all those credit cards floating out there to be spent on whatever is an intrinsic risk. So what we started doing in our agency, which has worked pretty well, is that when we bring somebody on, our expectation is they're going to be selling in 7 to 10 days. That's just how our system is set up in the final expense space. If they're not selling or they pull out, we pull their advances immediately. We send in an email, we don't beg or plead with them. We're like, hey, turn the advances off. They're not doing business anymore. We're not interested in doing business with them. We can always turn the advance back on. But advances are for producers. They're not for wannabes, okay? And the other thing too is if you just don't get a sense of somebody who is being honest, or they're not being straightforward, or they're kind of beating around the bush, they just are not conforming to the model that you have, pull their advance, okay? Many times the things that we see as problems are confirmed after the fact. We don't trust our guts or instincts enough. And the thing is you grant the privilege of an advance. So if you don't feel good about somebody, take it away from them until you figure out if they're worth your time. Number 3 is limit carrier availability. Now, one of the things the captive guys have right, the ones out there that predominantly work with one carrier, is that it's easier to control for a lot of these problems when you have just one company to deal with. If you're running an independent shop with a multitude of carriers, it's a little bit more complicated. And so one thing that I recommend is start agents with a limitation of carriers. Now, how many is too many? Well, I would say approximately 3 to 5 if you're on the independent side. I wouldn't have any more than that until they've proven that they're going to go work, they're going to go see the people, they're going to write business, and they actually execute on that idea. Until then, they don't need to have a bunch of carriers. There's a training argument to reduce or limit the amount of carriers anyway, as well as a financial risk element too. Again, all it takes is one guy to run up a bunch of debt between 3 to 5 carriers to realize this advice is actually very good. And the truth is, it's just very difficult to train an agent when they have so many carriers, when we all know they're probably going to just use a handful of those carriers anyway. So limit carrier availability so that you're not at risk financially as nearly as much. Now, this is a big one. This is kind of a lesson learned from my experience getting ripped off. This is something that the business doesn't really reflect because the trend is going the opposite direction. I think it's a huge problem. I think agents and agency owners especially are really going to suffer. And this is a big Pareto Principle 80-20 issue, is that you should, as an agency owner, use carriers that have traditional application processes that require a voice authorization. So again, the one agent out of all the theft that occurred to me ran up about 70 grand, maybe a little bit more in debt. And he did most of that with one carrier. And that one carrier's application process did not require a verbal authorization signature. It literally just required a click of the mouse button that the client agreed to that application. And guys, that is way too easy. And that's too risky of a proposition to give to an agent who hasn't proven to be an honest, trustworthy person. Again, trust is earned, it's not given. We give them a little ability to go be successful, but we don't give them the keys to the house until we get to know them a little bit more. That's how I look at it. And there are carriers out there, and there's more and more of these carriers, and I think it's just stupid, that don't have very detailed and rigorous application processes. In fact, the one carrier that had the least amount of debt fraudulently done with it was one that had a voice app process. In fact, the one gentleman who did so much damage financially to us, that's how we caught him. The person called in and said, hey, I didn't take this application out. We listened to the voice authorization application, and the guy who called in was different from the person on the other end of the line doing the interview. So all of this is to say, guys, if you're in the simplified issue whole life space, especially final expense, make sure you're using applications that require a voice authorization application process or an identity verification process. Maybe take a picture of an ID. Stay away, guys that run agencies, from those carriers that are too easy to get going with. You will be walloped by a huge chargeback if you start agents off with these carriers. What we do is reserve those after agents prove that they're actually writing business, that they're conformist to the system, and that they're not a huge risk like somebody who isn't, right? So very important to use the right carriers. Another consideration is advanced speed and advanced caps. So what a lot of these frauds do is they go out there and work with the carriers that advance commission immediately. Within 24 hours, you get paid, even if the premium hasn't been paid. And there are products, a lot of them, that's buy now, pay later type of mentality. And then the smart ones use the caps or write business with large advance caps. So an advance cap is, let's say you write a big case, and let's say it's $300 in premium. The commission on the deal is a total of $5,000 for the year. You're probably not going to get $5,000. Depending on the carrier, you might get as little as $1,500 up to $3,000. So the thing is that if you got a guy who goes rogue, if you have 10 apps before you catch them at $1,500 in advance, that's 15 grand lost. That's a lot better than if it was $3,000 and you lose double that. So what we do is we start agents with a smaller advance cap, approximately $1,500 in advance commissions. It's very rare that they're going to write such an enormous case that they would even go above $1,500. And as we see that agent write good business, then we'll extend that financing cap because it's conducive to the proof that they actually get out there and they write honest business. So that's another way to mitigate risk. I highly recommend that you control the advance cap. I don't want an advance cap that's too low, maybe like 500 or even 1,000, but 1,500 is a nice sweet spot for most life businesses especially. So look into monitoring that, because there's some companies that do it higher, and man, if it's in combination with a too easy liberal application process, you're going to get screwed. Next here is commission levels. Again, a lot of fraud agents, what they're going to do is look for the higher commission. I did an analysis of the people who stole from me, and they all were experienced agents. We just started them at higher commission levels. This is one reason why you don't ever want to build an agency by being the highest commission. It's like trying to build a grocery store and compete with Walmart at the lowest prices. Price is not how you position yourself optimally for the best value agent out there. And likewise, if you're offering the highest commissions out there and that's how you market, well, a fraud thinks, hey, I'm going to go to him and max out my comp on every sale that I steal. So stay away from that. I recommend not starting at highest commissions. Start a little bit lower. There's a multitude of reasons we'll save for another video to start lower. But the idea of starting lower is going to put you up in a better position to prevent being the first target amongst the fraudulent people out there. Number 7, sleeper agents. So again, you got to watch out for the agents that join your agency, don't write business, and then all of a sudden 3, 6, 9 months later start writing business. So I advocate to agency owners, if you got a guy who said they're coming on to write business and they're not actively writing business within a month, then pull their advance commissions. Take away their ability to do business with you. I don't personally terminate them yet, but I do pull their advance commissions out, because the whole purpose of me training you, bringing you on board, was to sell something, not to just sit there and be idle. And idleness is a surefire sign with a minority of those people that they're going to eventually try to run some, scam on you. So again, guys who don't go out there and sell, they don't get advances. And they have to go prove to me that they're going to actually go work when they go get their advances turned back on, even if I consider doing it. Number 8, when an agent gets chargebacks and vectors, what do? Be in front of it. Don't let it sit. Get the guy or gal on the phone. There is a chance that they just ignored or didn't even know of the vector. If they don't respond to me within 24 hours of the text, phone call, or email that I send, I tell them I'm pulling their advances effective immediately. I make them suffer. They are using you as their personal credit card to default on. They don't get the courtesy of taking their sweet time. They had, in many cases, 60 days to pay the debt off. And if they're vectoring or going into chargebacks, then everything stops till it gets paid. And again, for us at our agency, if they go vector with another agency and then we get notification, and we do, then we stop entirely offering them in advance. I do not do business with any agent who owes anybody money, because I'm going to get screwed eventually too, and I've learned that lesson the hard way. Should agents' credit matter? Again, another factor here. Personally, I don't monitor credit or care to look at credit as a determinator if the agent gets an advance or not. You may have more stringent standards. There are a lot of agents with credit problems. I'm not a credit analyst. It's a difficult decision to make on my behalf. I typically let the carriers make that decision. But I don't do credit checks, but it may be something you're interested in doing. But for me personally, it's not a part of my system, considering all the other things we do to make sure we're dealing with honest people. That's the thing. Some people go into hard luck. But that's different than being a fraud, right? Number 10, realities of carrier-agency relationships. Yeah, so you may be thinking, well, why doesn't the carrier handle a lot of this chargeback issues? What is the deal here? It sounds like you're responsible for so much and they do so little, because we really haven't even talked about what the carriers do. Well, the truth is carriers don't really care. This is why the system exists as it does. This is why you have multiple downlines. This is why you have a distribution channel where the carrier doesn't recruit or hire the agent. The whole purpose of the system is to be, in my opinion, a financial shield against chargebacks. And so when there's not an impetus on the carrier to care about this stuff because they're not experiencing nearly to the same extent the financial pain as the one or the upline directly above the agent leaving the chargeback, they really don't get that involved in the process unless it's some insane, obscene amount of money. For example, the gentleman that rolled up 60 grand with one of these companies, all they did was just show evidence that, hey, this guy looks like he didn't do his job. And all they suggested and got done was the termination of his license. And I'm thinking, like, well, what about the 60 grand the dude stole from me? Are you not going to show up in court or help me out with this? No, they don't even care. They don't even pursue it because they know, and their hope and their process is that somebody somewhere is going to pay the difference and cut of this. And you take care of this. We're just going to like do the bare minimum, and then whatever you do with it is your responsibility. That's the nature of all carriers. Like it or love it or hate it, it is what it is. And so don't expect the carriers to really pull their weight unless it's some enormous problem. Their way of looking at it is well, that's why you're an upline. You're absorbing the cost for these financial flops that happen because of anything, including fraud, which to me is ridiculous. But there again, that's the problem when you deal, that's part of the system, and it is what it is. 11, going into civil and criminal prosecution, going after alleged fraud. Let me give you some advice here on what I have done in the process. In talking with private investigators, it's a pretty simple process to prove or to get evidence collected on civil and criminal fraud. First of all, you need to approach the policy holders, contact them over the phone, in person, show up at their house, and get affidavits in writing that they never took out these policies, that they never did anything to actually get these policies into force, and to collect, essentially build a case is what you have to do. You can solicit the carrier if they did an EAP, if what the IP verifies as. Again, if the EAP is only required in face-to-face circumstances, but the IP shows a state over was where the app was completed, that is potential evidence that they did not do business like they said they did. And your goal here is to build this case through affidavits and the help of the carriers, which they'll do some of that, and then to present that to local authorities, wherever the municipality the agent lives, or to approach even the federal authorities as well. It's very difficult sometimes, federally especially. There's so many fraud cases going on. It's got to be almost a special interest case. What we told the feds is, hey, this guy's ripping off senior citizens that are low income, stealing their identity and information, and God knows what. We have to put a stop to this, right? So sometimes you get a lot of difficulty depending on the size and where the fraud took place. But long story short is you got to build a case, and then you've got to get a lawyer to take care of it, and it's going to cost you a lot of money. But the thing is, and my advice to you is to document this process, make it a part of the onboarding like what we did, because while that'll cost you a lot of money now, it'll greatly reduce the repeat offenders of people who think they can come in and rip you off, but now they see what you do about it and how you go hard and heavy after them. And then the last thing I'll mention here on chargeback fraud for agencies is, well, what signs can I look for if I think an agent is doing this? So there's some pretty telltale signs I've seen from agents who are ripping you off on the agency level that you can look for. First of all, this is why you have an audit system. Call behind your new business. If the phone doesn't work, if the person who picks up has no clue what it's about, it's likely a scam, especially if it's a second or third time that you make the phone call. And as it starts to add up, I would immediately suspend advancing there and then work out the details after the fact. So what if the guy have to sit on the sidelines for a while to work it out? It's your ass on the line financially if you're wrong and it ends up being a chargeback. The other thing that you need to do, as I've seen this time and again, the fraudsters aren't that smart. I can think of all of them. They all wrote enormous cases. They maxed out the face amount. When you go look at the production reports, they would have max face amounts for that particular carrier's final expense plans with each of these clients. And how often is it in final expense or even in life insurance that you're getting a max case multiple times with the same carrier? It's very unlikely. And so if we see a repetition of that, then that is likely, potentially, a scam. And those are red flag scenarios where you see one big 40,000 or a 35,000 and their max is 40. If you see a couple of those, you need to stop what you're doing, make a phone call to those clients and ensure that they are who they say they are, or have your team do an audit on those. Again, that's the common thing you see, is that agents are trying to max out the advance cap because they already are aware of what the advance commission caps are, and they're trying to take as much as they can before they get found out. And it's kind of a big run for a short period of time. You'll see agents do like 2 or 3 cases with a carrier a week, maybe up to 5, and they'll be max cases every time because, again, the whole idea is I'm going to steal from this guy for as long as I can, but knowing I'm probably going to be found out and cut. So instead of writing $30 cases, they write $150 plus cases to max out their cap. So that is our masterclass on chargebacks, how to mitigate and prevent them. Again, the big takeaways here I want to leave you with is this. First of all, I hope you enjoyed this training. I'm very passionate about making sure that honest agencies like you guys out there don't get ripped off. It's a shady world out there with agents, and you got to be very careful. There's some very good agents, but there's just a few that's all it takes is to rip you off. So you got to be very careful. But the big takeaways here are you got to be up front and center about your process to prevent. You have to show them examples of what happens if they decide to steal from you. You have to show examples of how you do audits against every single agent for a percentage of their book. You have to make it completely obvious to them that the attempt to try to steal from you is stupid, and that the thief is better off to go somewhere else and steal from someone else. And that's why you want to go through the process that I described on the screen a bit earlier on about setting up a system up front early on that lets people know exactly what to expect and why, to scare off the weak hands. As far as the rest of this, all the questions and issues here, the big thing I can say is if you're involved with your agents and you care about them and you're wanting them to go sell and you keep them accountable to that, a lot of that fraudulent behavior just doesn't happen as much. A lot of the issues are more common when you leave somebody alone and they feel like you're not watching them and they feel they can get away, right? So you have to keep your eyes on them. And as soon as an agent doesn't adhere to your system and doesn't conform, don't ever think that your advance is their right to have from you. It's not. It is a privilege. And a privilege comes with conditions like actually selling insurance and doing what you say you're going to do. So my advice is to pull advances first and then figure out the details later. The worst case is you're wrong and you can explain to them why and show them evidence of that as far as the risks to you as an agency owner. And best case scenario, you've prevented being stolen tens of thousands of dollars that would have cost you tremendously. So I hope you enjoyed this content. If you did and you haven't already, please subscribe, like this. Please share it to agency owners. They really need to hear this because this is a critical issue that's cost so much money and ended agencies well too soon and didn't have to. And we will be back next time with more content. Thanks for watching.